Hi, everybody. So it's 3:30 East, 12:30 Pacific time, 3:30 Eastern time. And it's a real privilege because I'm about to have a conversation, you guys, with Alex Gorsky. Alex is the CEO of Johnson & Johnson, and we're going to talk about the vaccine, the announcement that Johnson & Johnson now has a vaccine, how it's going to be distributed, how it's different. There are a lot of questions about its efficacy in clinical trials. And hi, everyone. So I'm excited to be able to have a conversation. I feel pretty proud of myself that I got Alex Gorsky to be willing to do this with us. So if you all have some questions about the vaccine that you would like the CEO of Johnson & Johnson to answer, hi, Jake Cohen. Hi, Sharon Feldstein. Anyway, he'll be joining us momentarily. I understand this is his first Instagram. And so let's technology is working. He's a great guy. And I'm looking forward to answering not only your questions, but I too have a lot of questions about this. Hi, Chicago. As you probably read, they're teaming up with Merc so they can make sure. Hey, Alex Gorski. Hey.
Hey, Katie, how you doing? Great to join
you
today.
How do you like this modern technology? We can just jump on the phone, do an Instagram live, and you can help a lot of people watching this better understand the J&J vaccine and a little more about kind of your clinical trials and distribution. We have a lot of questions. So thanks so much for doing this.
No, look, I'm honored to be here. Thank you for taking the time to do this. It's a really important conversation. So let's get it going.
Well, let me ask you, first of all, I mean, it's a pretty extraordinary achievement. I know you've been working on this for months, as have other people in the pharmaceutical industry, but you've developed a single shot, temperature stable vaccine. Before we get into the nitty gritty, tell me, Alex, what your reaction was when you heard that it was a thumbs up, that the J&J vaccine was ready to go.
Well, look, Katie, you're right. This took us more than 13 months to pull together. And when you reflect back that 13 months ago, we were literally getting the genomic sequencing information about the COVID-19 virus on a computer. And that here we are 13 months later, and we've received approval from the FDA. We've received a recommendation to go ahead from an independent advisory committee and from the CDC. And we've already delivered almost 4 million doses here in the United States. It's pretty remarkable. We couldn't be more proud. There's been, as you can imagine, just, long days, nights, a tremendous amount of effort. But, look, when we first saw the results, I remember the Zoom call. We saw it. There's obviously a tremendous sense of relief that we saw that, and relief not only in the sense that, okay, we have this data at Johnson & Johnson, but really relief knowing that we knew this was going to make a really important difference for our country and the world based upon the efficacy results and the profile that we have, of course, with one shot and minimal refrigeration.
Yeah, let's do the ABCs of the J&J vaccine. I saw that it's 72% effective. And I don't know about you, Alex, but if I had a choice between like 95 and 72%, I'd be like, give me the 95% effective. So can you explain how your clinical trials were in a different setting than those of Moderna and Pfizer, and how that might have impacted the efficacy that you saw there?
Sure, Katie. And look, over the last 13 months, I think all of us have become experts, not only about COVID-19, but about clinical trials and statistical methodology and confidence intervals. And there's a few key points to keep in mind on what's different about these trials. I think number one is that they were conducted at very different times. So our trial was conducted starting in September of 2020 and continues to this day. And what's important about that is, you remember last summer, we saw the incidence rate decrease significantly in the United States, let alone around the world. And then in September and October, we saw that curve start to go up significantly. Mm-hmm. And so the incidence rate of the disease when we were conducting our trial was at one of its peak acceleration periods. Number two, our trial was a very global trial. So about 45% of our patients were in the United States. About 40% were in Latin America, most of that in northern Brazil. And about 15% was in South Africa. And what's really important is that in South Africa and in northern Brazil. That's where the two most challenging variants, arguably, are being seen at the greatest rate. In fact, of the patients infected in our trial in South America, more than 90% have the South African variant. And in spite of that, or even in these conditions, we saw an 85% effectiveness rate in serious disease. And we saw 100% effectiveness rate as it related to keeping people out of the hospital and keeping people from dying. And so I think ultimately, as you're trying to compare apples to oranges, or you might even say, apples to tomatoes, knowing that this is protecting you from going to the hospital, it's going to help protect our hospitals from being overcrowded, knowing that this is going to prevent people from dying is what's most important. And we're getting that with a single shot. We're getting that with basically standard refrigeration. And the impact on that in rural areas in particular, let alone around the world, is really important.
Well, let me ask you, I think people were having trouble hearing me. You aren't having trouble hearing me, Alex, are you?
Loud and clear. I can hear you great. Thanks.
Okay. Let me know, everyone, if the audio is better. I think it's because I just had one. Oh, sorry. So I guess that raises a question, though, Alex. What about, if some of these were shown effective without the variants, are you worried these new variants would make the vaccines that are already on the market less effective?
Well, that's our concern. In fact, we know that to be true based upon some data that we have. And we're the only vaccine at this point that has a significant amount of clinical data. And what that means is actually in patients in a clinical trial, not in a model that's been done. And so that's why we think this data is so important for the world right now, especially when we're starting to see these variants spread to other locations. And look, in long term, we're going to have to watch surges, particularly as we think about traveling to other places in the world and getting our lives back to normal.
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are very concerned about these variants, which actually makes me very anxious, because does that mean that the vaccines that are being given so far that were tested without these variants existing, that they may not be nearly as effective? I mean, I guess the bottom line I'm asking is how concerned should we all be, everybody watching this, be about these new strains that are popping up?
Well, Katie, look, all of these vaccines are effective. That's what's really important for everybody to know. And the relative degree of effectiveness, we don't understand completely yet. We need to gather more data, but we do know that they are going to help protect you. And we also know that what we need to focus on right now is stopping transmission, because as this infection is transmitted, every time it's transmitted, it can change a little bit. And that's what leads to these variants and mutations. Some of these mutations, really don't pose a fundamental threat. Others can be much more significant. And so the faster we can get people vaccinated, the faster we can get this transmission from taking place, the greater probability we're going to have of stopping the mutations and bringing down the curve. So that's what's most important. And then longer term, we're going to have a better understanding if these mutations do tend to see a surge, which vaccines may work better than others in particular situations. But overall, the message should be they all work. We should all get shots in the arms as soon as we can.
And in the case of your vaccine, you only need one shot. So, and I know it's used with threaded DNA. I don't even understand what that means, Alex, versus mRNA. mRNA, which is the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. Oh, wait, not Pfizer, just Moderna, right?
It's a Pfizer and the Moderna. So those are called mRNA. So think of that as a portion of the spike protein in a lipophilic bubble, perhaps around it. And in our case, what we do is we have an inactivated cold or flu virus that we've used before in things such as HIV, Ebola. It's a carrier. Think of it as a spaceship almost. And then we take a chunk of the spike protein that insert it in. So when at first your body thinks it's a cold virus, it takes it in, but then it sees the spike protein and it starts producing antibodies. So you're actually getting a combined effect. And we think that that vector approach is what gives us not only an antibody response, but longer term a T and B cell response, which we think can lead to an even deeper, more patent, more durable, longer term. And that's why we think we're seeing these results even against these more virulent strains in South Africa and northern Brazil.
What about the possibility of getting a booster shot, having another shot down the road? Is that something that you all will be watching to see how long this seems to be effective?
Yes, I mean there's a few different I might say scenarios we're looking at. One is we're very confident in our single shot based upon the data that we've gathered. But simultaneously, we're looking to see is if we give you another shot, do you get an even better or more durable outcome? We'll have that data later this year. But again, let me emphasize the data that we've generated on a single shot is very encouraging and quite strong, producing the kind of results that gives the FDA and the CDC confidence. The other thing we're looking at is if there are mutations or variants that develop in a significant way, do we need to add a booster on to account for that particular adaptation? And all three companies are working on those things as we speak.
You're going to see what happens. Meanwhile, I know that you're partnering with Merck, and that's pretty unusual to be collaborating with one of your competitors. Tell me how that collaboration came about and how the two companies are working together.
Well, Katie, I don't need to state the obvious. These are very different kind of times. And the real enemy here, the competitor, is the COVID-19 virus. And we felt it was important that during times like this, we need to do everything we possibly can to make sure that we're trying to accelerate or increase the number of vials and vaccines that we have available. And being able to partner with a company like Merck that's got a long tradition in vaccines in terms of producing drug substance and actually filling the vials is a great opportunity for us to do that. We're partnering with Sanofi over in Europe to do the same. And we've got other partners here in the United States as well as in Europe and in other parts of the world. So it's a very extensive platform, but we were excited to announce that with the government yesterday. I think it's a super example of not only a company-to-company partnership, but a public-to-private partnership. And these are the kind of steps that we should be taking during times like this to rebuttress, to accelerate, to provide insurance, to be doing everything we can, again, to make more vaccines available.
What about the president's assertion that all adults will be vaccinated in this country? There will be enough vaccine to go around by May. Do you see that happening? And do you see any obstacles to achieving that goal?
Absolutely, I think it's possible. And I'm really encouraged because with the release of our vaccine and the kind of volumes that we're talking about over the next several months, I know recently both Pfizer and Moderna have also increased their volumes significantly. We're talking, several 100 million additional vaccines being available during the next several months. And what I think what's going to happen is initially we've clearly had challenges in the distribution and administration side, mostly because we've had a minimal supply or a limited supply, I should say.
Right.
And we've also had pretty tight regulations about who should go first, second, which I think are appropriate early on to hit first responders, long-term care facilities, elderly patients. But now that we're going to have more vaccines, now that it won't be a supply issue, they should be able to relax some of those guidelines. And we then can get out at a much more significant rate. And we need to get into communities of color, Hispanic communities, Black communities. We need to get to churches. We need to go into stadiums. And once we have enough supply, we'll be able to do that. And I think we're going to see a significant ramp up then of vaccines being administered around our country to hit those kind of rates.
I have a dumb question, and that is, how do they decide? I mean, so people go, I know a few people who have gotten vaccinated. My first question is, which one did you get? And they tell me Pfizer, Moderna, whatever. And how do they decide what vaccine is distributed to what vaccination points, if you will? How does that work?
Well, at a very high level, it's done on a population-based basis by the United States government, because we're actually shipping these products and the government then takes control. It then allocates to the states. The states then allocate locally down at the county, at the region, and at the community level. And I think up until this point in time, it's pretty much been, here's what's available, you should get your shot. And, going forward, that will continue to play out. But again, let me emphasize, I think everyone should really be in the mode of, trying to get any of these shots that they can as soon as possible. And I think that's what's going to make the biggest difference.
I was going to ask you about the efficacy on children, and a couple of people watching this have asked about pregnant women. By the way, I'm talking to Alex Gorsky, everyone. He's the CEO of Johnson & Johnson, about their new vaccine. But people with autoimmune diseases or autoimmune issues, pregnant women, and especially children who make up 25% of the population. A lot of people are saying, hey, if we want to reach herd immunity, we have to start vaccinating kids as well. So can you address those issues for us, Alex?
Sure. Well, look, what's important to remember is while they make up 25% of the population, some of them have already had COVID. Number two, we know that it doesn't appear to manifest itself in as significant as way with kids. We're learning in some children, it certainly does. We've seen those isolated cases. We're getting ready to test right now. We're talking to the FDA. We're developing the protocols. We hope to start those literally in the coming months, and we should have data by later this year down to 12 years of age and even younger. And I believe Pfizer and Moderna are testing as we speak. The other thing that I would say, Katie, is in other areas where we've used this platform, this vector, for example, in HIV and Ebola, we've used it very broadly in older patients and younger patients, and we have not seen any safety issues. I think the other really important issue is that the safety profile thus far in adults, after it's been administered, Pfizer, Moderna, and ours, now, in tens of millions, hundreds of millions of patients, we haven't seen major surprises that differ from what we saw in the clinical trials. But we're going to have a lot more information by later this year, I think, with all the vaccines regarding pediatric use. And we're also looking to initiate those trials for women of childbearing age and pregnant women to get the same data. But again, there too, up to this point, we have not seen any indicators that it should pose any significant risk.
So if your daughter was pregnant and she had the opportunity, Alex, to get the vaccine, would you recommend she hold off?
Look, I think that's a decision that needs to be made between the woman and their healthcare provider based upon the overall healthcare assessment of her particular condition. And the more data we get, the more information that we can gather, I think is only going to increase the confidence and trust for all of these patients.
I'm curious, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, as you probably know, expressed quote unquote moral concerns over your vaccine because of the use of lab-grown cells that, quote, descend from cells taken in the 1980s from the tissue of aborted fetuses. And I'm curious to your reaction to their quote unquote moral concerns over this particular vaccine.
Look, I understand many people have different concerns and questions about vaccines. What's important to know in this case is we followed all the appropriate bioethical guidelines regarding the use of these cell lines. We take it very seriously. And look, we think that as people become educated and really understand the underlying source of this science, that we'll gain the confidence and trust of many to see the real utility of our vaccine.
Where is your distribution process at right now, Alex? Is it you said how many people had been vaccinated? Is that with clinical trials and all across the globe, or where are you in terms of actually delivering the J&J vaccine to people who are eligible for it?
Okay, so we've already shipped about 3.9 million doses in the United States. And that's in some cases already being administered as we speak. In fact, I think I saw some signs of people being administered yesterday in Ohio. I'm going to be at a site tomorrow in New Jersey. And so it is in the system as we speak. Since earlier last year, we did approximately 1,000 patients in our phase 1A and 2 trial. We did approximately 45,000 patients in our phase 3 trial. So we've already administered it to about 46,000 people just through the trial process. And that's what gave us approval with the FDA. And again, we've shipped 3.9, and we expect to ship about 20 million by the end of March. In the first half of the year, we will have shipped to 100 million doses here in the United States.
Someone who sounds like he or she knows what they're talking about says, is the J&J ensemble study going to continue into a 2-series study to evaluate 2-syringe efficacy?
Yes, that trial is ongoing. So we had Ensemble 1, which was the trial that I just talked about with 1 shot. And
Right.
there's a parallel Ensemble 2 of approximately 30,000 patients that's underway that we should have data on in the back end of the year.
So have you gotten the shot yet?
No, I have not, but I look forward to getting it hopefully soon.
And anything else that you think is important for people watching this to know, Alex, before we wrap this up about the vaccines in general? You know, a lot of people, I think, are anti-vaccinations in general. And of course, I guess that's their right. I don't know. That's a controversy I'm not weighing into right now. But what would you say to people who may still be really a bit hesitant about getting this vaccine, worried about side effects, worried about other things that, you know, maybe worried that the science was rushed because of these unprecedented times? What would you say to those folks?
No, look, I can understand their questions. This is very personal. This is you know, our health, and we also know that we're facing the most significant pandemic really ever in our history. And I also believe this is a really important moment for the biopharmaceutical industry to be able to rally to produce these kind of vaccines in this period of time. And what I would say is as follows: is number one, there's been extensive studies that have been conducted under the guidance of the FDA, of the CDC, completely independent bodies, now combined over 100,000 patients that have demonstrated the safety and the efficacy of these vaccines. 2, in the early utilization, again, in tens of millions of patients in the United States, 100 million, more than 100 million globally, what we've seen in terms of side effects, reactions have been very consistent with what we saw in the clinical trials. And I think we can take a lot of confidence seeing that broad application and to know that there doesn't appear at this point to be any unexpected effects thus far. And what's most important, Katie, is that every day that goes by where someone doesn't get vaccinated and that this virus is transmitted and has a potential to mutate represents the potential for another hospitalization and another death. And so the sooner that we can all get vaccinated, and look, I know some surveys show that perhaps 10% of people will not get vaccinated under any conditions, but there's another maybe 20% who want to have a wait and see approach. And what I would say is they wait and see this data, is they wait and see their brothers, their sisters, their friends and neighbors get vaccinated, as they see people returning to a normal life. I'm hopeful that they'll be encouraged to say, hey, we should all do that so we can, hug our families again, so that we can go out to dinner and we can get back to a new kind of normal.
Before we go, I just got a couple of other questions from social media. This is great because you can directly respond to people's questions and concerns. And a lot of people are asking about immunocompromised adults. And I'm curious if you've studied that and if they have reason to be worried about these vaccines.
Well, we don't have the definitive information yet, but what I would say is that here too, our vector was used in Ebola and HIV, specifically in immunocompromised adults to a significant degree. Now, this did not have the COVID-19 piece of the virus, but the carrier has been, those kind of patients have been exposed, and we haven't seen any significant issues or major issues. So we're going to learn a lot more as we get more patient experience who have been immunocompromised, but we're confident based upon the results that we've seen thus far that it should be safe and effective there too.
And how are you tracking that? Do you have people, and then I promise I'm going to let you go. You're a CEO, you got a lot to do, but I'm just curious, how do you determine? I think probably being transparent is going to be so important for all these companies behind the vaccines. But let's say you have a certain segment of the population that is having side effects or issues. How do you track that, and how do you make that part of the data system? Are you
Oh,
following up with people?
there's an extensive adverse event reporting system in place right now that's being done, in conjunction with the FDA, the CDC, the NIH, other bodies to collect that information. We're going to have a very robust and large repository of information. And I agree. And that's why not only myself, but other CEOs made the pledge months ago to be absolutely transparent, to be very explicit with our data, with our clinical trial site and design, because ultimately having the trust, having the confidence of not only the people on this Zoom, but every day around our country is going to be important so that ultimately they agree to have a shot in their arm and to really bring an end to this virus.
Were you upset when you read that Texas is opening up, that they've gotten rid of their mask mandate? I think Mississippi did as well. And I'm curious if you're worried about the impact that that's going to have on containing the spread of COVID.
Well, I am concerned that people are going to let their guard down too early. And I think that the next few months, assuming we can get, again, the majority of Americans vaccinated, I think we will see a significant change in the course of this disease. However, we have to remain diligent. We have to remain on guard. We have to watch this fall as people go back. Could we see one of these variants go up? We're going to be living with this for a while. And so we're all going to have to, watch our guards. And I realize that regionally, some practices may be different, but, we are so close to making a big difference. Let's not give up too early. And like I'm sure many people, I want to get my life back to normal too. But I'm confident we can be there soon. But let's make sure we're safe to the very end.
And one final question. Sorry, they keep coming in. We do not know if this vaccine prevents transmission yet, right? I think that is an area that a lot of people are confused about. Like, if I get vaccinated, does that mean, I know I can't get it, but does it mean I can still spread it?
Well, we don't have definitive data, but the data that we've seen thus far is really encouraging. And it addresses exactly this issue because it's showing thus far that it has a significant impact on transmission. And also that is what is so critical, because some people might say, well, I've already had it, or, I'll be protected, and say, yes, but you could still be a carrier. So again, it gets back to get vaccinated. Let's get as many people vaccinated as we can to really make a difference.
So even if you've had COVID in any way, shape, or form, depending on the symptoms, you should still be vaccinated because we don't know how long those antibodies last, correct?
Exactly. And so again, work with your physician, follow the CDC guidelines, but vaccinations are going to make the big difference here. And also, as I mentioned earlier, it's not only going to ensure the antibody response, but that long-term B cell, T cell, humoral response that will provide hopefully much more durable protection over time.
And are you sharing all your data with Moderna and with Pfizer? In other words, are you all, just as Merck is collaborating with you, are you all kind of keeping track on the efficacy and the long-term effects, et cetera, side effects of all these vaccines so that you all know how they're faring out in the marketplace or out in the public?
Katie, I've been at this for more than 30 years, and I have never seen the kind of sharing and information that we're seeing now. I mean, our scientists were literally doing Saturday conference calls and Zooms, sharing kind of information. Ordinarily, that would not take place. But these are very different kind of circumstances. And so I think that kind of partnering, that kind of collaboration, frankly, it's something I hope we continue going forward as we think about applying some of these technologies to cancer, to Alzheimer's disease, to other conditions, and really could mark a new stage for the way that we think about drug development going forward.
And dare I say, future pandemics. And I hate to even say that because we're just getting, hopefully, fingers crossed, out of this one. But, this will put us ahead of, being able to quickly respond to other potentially deadly viruses, correct?
Absolutely. We need to prepare. I mean, there's one thing we've learned in this pandemic is the importance of global public health. And without global public health, we don't have national security. We don't have economic security. We don't have societal security. So we need to be better prepared. And it's certainly my hope that we'll take these lessons, we'll apply them going forward, and be in a much better position. What will likely be the next time something like this hits in a very globally connected and integrated world.
Well, you're in a great position to push that as CEO of J&J to really keep emphasizing this to the Biden administration, because it's hard to see threats when they're not right in front of us, and that's why it's so important to be prepared. And you never get credit if nothing happens, but of course, if something does happen, then everyone is so grateful that there's been a group of determined and dedicated people who are focusing on that.
Well, look, I think it's been a wake-up call for all of us. And I don't think that there's a mayor, a governor, a CEO, or a major stakeholder that isn't thinking about what should I be thinking about regarding health. And we've all learned important lessons as it relates to healthcare, through this entire experience. So I'm confident, but I'll be working hard to make sure that those things aren't forgotten in the near term.
Yeah, please do that, because we're all counting on that, Anyway, Alex Gorsky, CEO of Johnson & Johnson. This is a big get for me for my Instagram Live.
This is a big get for me, Katie.
Well, thanks. And I think everyone listening really appreciates it. And, if there's other information about the vaccines, as the data becomes available, information becomes available, please let me share it with everyone who follows me so they can be informed and make the best decisions for them and their families.
Katie, well, this is a real public service that you're providing, giving people an opportunity to have real talk, authentic, face-to-face. This is a really important public service, so thank you for doing it. And we'll make sure we come back as we get additional data along the way.
Really appreciate it. Great to see you, Alex. Okay, thanks, everybody. Bye. Take care. Bye.